Okay, we're looking here at an article in yesterday's Sydney Morning Herald about Xanax. And I just thought I'd look through it and discuss a few points that come up in it. Experts, the pills they pop like Smarties are more addictive and harder to kick than heroin. Well, it's possible, I suppose. The Xanax is a benzodiazepine, isn't it? And the benzos are known to link to the same molecule or receptors in the brain as do opium and heroin and so on. So they are pretty addictive. Dirty little secret in mental health. Well, the fact is, Xanax, those minor tranquilizers don't work, do they? They just don't work. They don't work. They're addictive. They create more problems than they're supposed to solve, don't they? The more you take, if you take them for panic attacks, your panic attacks are going to be increasing in severity and in number. The intensity of the panic attack will increase, and the numbers of them. You will have more, paradoxically, you'll have more panic attacks, yes. Anxiety is our most common illness, they say, but anxiety has always been around. It's not anything new, as they say in this article. Xanax is, they say, seductively dangerous, better than anything else in the medicine cabinet for someone in the throes of a panic attack. No amount of deep breathing and talking to your therapist will do what Xanax does straight away. Yes, these tranquilizers relax you, but only temporarily. In the end, you'd pay a terrible price. Getting off the stuff is hell on earth. The sting in the tail is that a doctor has legally prescribed every pill that is swallowed. In my early 20s, I was addicted to Serapax for 4.5 years. That's another benzodiazepine. It was prescribed for a doctor for stress, and it's also known as its scientific name is Oxazepam, but its trade name was Serapax, which is a combination of Sere as in serene and pax as in Latin for peace. It was supposedly a serene peace, but of course it was far from a serene peace. Tranquilizing had the opposite effect, didn't it? I was hysterical all the time because I was having more and more panic attacks and terrible intensity, more panic attacks and worse panic attacks. If I was unemployable before I took Serapax, I was 10 times more unemployable afterwards. I mention unemployability because the reason we take pills often in the first place is due to stress about employment or lack of employment and so on. Xanax. Well, Xanax is a new benzodiazepine. Well, no, it's not a new one. It's been around since 1981. Xanax addiction is the Valium story all over again, but potentially much, much worse. Well, it's the drug they're dispensing instead of Valium nowadays, isn't it? But it is a sister drug or a related drug. The myth Xanax, like Valium before it, makes of his patients' lives as they become hopelessly addicted to their cure. Yes, addicted to the cure. That's known as iatrogenic phenomenon. It's a phenomenon, isn't it? Iatrogenic. IAT, iatro, RO, GNIC. That's when the cure is worse than the disease. Condemnation of the drug. The myth Xanax, like Valium before it, makes of his, they're talking about a particular doctor here, of his patients' lives as they become hopelessly addicted to the cure. It has no place in the treatment of anxiety. Yes, it doesn't. You can become addicted in a couple of weeks, quite quickly. It causes more problems than it solves, making sick people sicker and turning them into unwitting drug addicts. Yes, once you're addicted, you are an addict. It might be legal because you're going to a doctor, but you're just as addicted as that heroin user on the street. You are. We're talking really nasty, potentially lethal systems as people try to get off it. Just try to stop taking it. Just try. So once you're enslaved to a benzodiazepine, just try to stop taking it. See what happens. You'll have a dreadful panic attack, won't you? You'll be in a shocking state. You can suffer seizures. Yes. You can become delirious getting off Xanax. Well, I found getting off Serepax very difficult. You can suffer seizures getting off Serepax, and perhaps I should have been in hospital at the time. My heart was going like that. It was going like that. Boom, boom, boom. I forget now. It's 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, but my heart was going boom, bang, bang, a bang, and I was frightened. I thought, I thought I might be dying, yes. And I was doing that all on my own. Xanax was approved for use in Australia in 1981 for panic disorder. You'll be in a bigger panic once you're addicted, won't you? You'll be in 10 times a bigger panic once you're enslaved. You will be, but there is hope because I got off a minor tranquilizer addiction. If I can get off, you too can get off. There's light at the end of the tunnel for you. Xanax was approved for use in Australia. Unlike its close cousin Valium, which can linger in the system and has a reputation for leaving its users feeling hungover, the effects of Xanax wearing off about 4 to 6 hours after it takes effect. That's why it's so tempting to take another one. Valium, and yes, I was addicted to Serapax and Oxazepam, as I said, and that wears off. I'd be always, they have things called half-lives, my doctor was telling me. My poor doctor, my poor kind doctor. Xanax and Valium belong to a group of drugs called benzodiazepines. I say benzodiazepines. Some people might say benzodiazepines. So some people say benzos for short, don't they? They all work, and don't forget, I'm not a doctor. I'm not pretending to be a doctor. Always seek medical advice and legal advice too if you're addicted in this day and age to a medical drug that was prescribed to you by a doctor. Xanax and Valium belong to a group of drugs called benzodiazepines. They all work on the body's central nervous system to slow the brain down. They differ from one another in potency and duration. Those that enter your brain most quickly, like Valium and Xanax, can make you high fast. They call that high. They call being like a zombie, being a stoned zombie. That's high, is it? I can't say that I was high looking back. Ugh. I was a zombie for 4.5 years on Serepax, and I took enough to kill a horse. I took the largest bottle, not the single size. I took the double size, and I went through. I think was it a bottle and a half a week, or close to 2 bottles a week. Getting precise numbers on Xanax use in Australia is difficult because hundreds of thousands of scripts are issued privately to non-concession card holders, which accounts for the vast majority. Meaning they're not captured in the pharmaceutical benefits scheme database. Yes, it used to break my heart once I was off pills, and I'd walk around Sydney. I'd be getting around Sydney, and I'd see in the gutter an empty packet of Serapax. And I thought, what's that poor person going through? And I just was just shocking to see this. Just to see an empty Serapax packet in the gutter somewhere. 400,000 prescriptions for Alprazolam. We're talking about Xanax here. 400,000 prescriptions for Alprazolam were written in 2010. That's Xanax. That's what this article is all about. But I'm relating it to Serepax. While there had been a reduction in overall benzo prescribing, Alprazolam sales rose by 28%. Well, it's obviously the drug of the moment. It's popular. The drug companies are probably pushing it, and doctors have got to use something. And it would be in their books, as there are fashions in dispensing. There are fashions in dispensing drugs. Compared to other benzos, there has been a 3-fold increase in Xanax-related triple-O calls in the past decade. That could be related because it's the drug that's flavor of the month, and other drugs like Valium are being prescribed possibly less frequently. I wouldn't know. Hearing from police, other drug treatment agencies, hospitals, and the ambulance service, this drug is a big concern. Yes, it would be. This person, the writer, is talking about their experience. Feel an almost instant soothing sensation. Is that soothed, being turned into a zombie? I suppose it could be. I suppose you could call it soothing. Many people under the influence of Xanax underestimate its potency and take too much, particularly when they mix it with other drugs or alcohol. Yes, that's very dangerous. It is very dangerous to mix it with other drugs. They become so uninhibited, so chillaxed, that's a combination of chill and Xanax, that they do things they wouldn't normally do. So many anxious middle-class casual Xanax pill poppers who take 1 or perhaps 2 tablets before an international flight or a board meeting could get into trouble. Yes, you do hear of people going crazy on aeroplanes, don't you? Xanax is like no other benzo. I wonder about that. I mean, Serapax was a horrible experience for me, being addicted to Oxazepam. It was like hell on earth. It was like being a slave. I thought I'd never see a day when I was not enslaved. Just shocking. I'm sure people on Xanax would feel the same. You take one and you feel better quickly, but then it wears off and your symptoms re-emerge, and so you take another one. That's the same for Valium or Serapax if you're addicted to those, or Librium. But it's the withdrawal causing the symptoms, not your anxiety. Whatever it is, you go through hell and a panic, and you take more and more, and it becomes, what do they call it? Vicious circle, and sort of all self-perpetuating. But trying to work that out is pretty hard when all you know is that this drug makes you feel lovely. It's not about lovely. Yes. They talk about heroin or cocaine and the addiction potential here. The addiction potential is about the same, if not worse. Yes, I've heard people say that being addicted to Serapax can be as bad as heroin, but you also hear doctors say, some people will say that tobacco is harder to get off than heroin. And then you hear doctors say that people diagnosed with lung cancer can give up cigarettes quite easily. So, most people diagnosed with lung cancer can give up smoking quite easily. I have heard that said before. But anyway, they're likening benzodiazepine use here, Xanax use, to being addicted to heroin or cocaine. Well, I couldn't see much difference once I was a slave, and I used to say that to my doctor. He saw himself as being like a drug pusher too, and I saw myself as like being well, I was addicted. I never made any secret. I never denied that I was addicted because I was. It's just like you are addicted and you're equally addicted, except your addiction is legal. That's the only difference. And you're not injecting it through a needle all the time. Chronic benzo use, and Xanax is the most potent, produces stupid people. Well, I admit that I was a Serapax zombie. I was zombified for 4.5 years. They're now teaching their medical students not to prescribe benzos for panic disorder, full stop. Yes, they just don't work. If you are having panic attacks and you take these pills to stop panics, these benzodiazepines, you will have more panics, and there'll be panics of greater intensity. And if you thought your original panic attack was shocking, just you wait till you have those benzodiazepines, Xanax withdrawals. Just you wait, yes, and you'll find out what a real panic attack is like. Confusion and memory loss, so common with Xanax, is called temporary cognitive impairment. Well, I was cognitively impaired on Serepax too. I'd go somewhere and I would never, if I went somewhere in a bus, I wouldn't even be able to remember what I saw out the window or anything. I just barely remember having even gone. So they are amnesic, some of these benzodiazepines. Works really well for anxiety, but it also has a paradoxical effect. They don't really work very well for anxiety. They only work temporarily for that first short initial period, for the first couple of weeks, if if you've got stress, and then it gets worse and worse. You can get addicted very quickly. True, not everyone gets addicted, but some people, a percentage of people who take this drug, these benzodiazepines, will become addicted, and it can happen quite quickly. Off their faces on the drug, yes. I was off my face, as they say. People become very passionate about their Xanax. Well, of course they become passionate. They're addicted. They're enslaved to this drug. Of course they have feelings for it. They want it. They're worried about their supply. It's going to dry up, They're going to be afraid of it drying up. I was always afraid. I thought, what if my doctor dies? I thought, what if there's a war and my doctor dies? You panic, you go around, you get looking around I used to go and get a few extra prescriptions from other doctors just to make sure, I had a good supply. Yes, someone cried because they couldn't take it when they went to jail. The era of Xanax, yes. Anxiety is a serious public health issue. There is nothing 21st century about anxiety. It's been around under different guises forever. They talk about post-traumatic stress disorder in World War I. It was called shell shock and sometimes cowardice. Anxiety has not had the public education profile that depression has had in recent years. And so, even though it affects more people and causes nearly as much suicide, it falls below the radar. Yes, anxiety has always been around. People have always had worries. Anxiety is an umbrella term to prescribe a range of problems, including post-traumatic stress disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, phobia, and panic disorder. And they talk about people, they give a description there of anxiety and certain people who have anxiety problems and what it's like for them. Someone called Xanax alcohol in a pill. In other words, it dulls out the world, doesn't it? Benzos plug a gap that evolution has yet to fill. Well, I mean, those receptors are there in the brain, and they will link up to the benzo molecule or whatever it is, won't they? They, you know. Private prescriptions. Private prescriptions, given scripts. I hear about people on private prescriptions being given scripts for 102 milligram strength tablets with 3 repeats, and that is an absolute recipe for addiction. Any doctor who writes a prescription like that has, in one consultation, created a new Xanax addict, a Xanax addict. Well, I was a Serepax addict, and 30 years ago, my doctor went to Spain for 6 weeks, and while he wrote me enough prescriptions. He wrote me enough prescriptions and repeats to get me through that period. I was glad he came back in one piece from Spain. Yes, I was. I did get through that period, fortunately. People in the criminal justice system because of Xanax. Yes, you're going to be a mess. You're going to be a mess if you're addicted to a benzodiazepine. Xanax, and I heard on one show years ago, a doctor was asked, who would you rather operate on you, someone addicted to alcohol or someone addicted to Serapax? And he said a person on Serapax couldn't do anything. He'd rather be operated on by a person who was under the influence of alcohol. Xanax has been responsible for, they're talking about a judge now, responsible for her revoking more drug orders than any other substance, including heroin, methamphetamines, and alcohol. In other words, this Xanax drug is highly addictive and highly available, isn't it? It's easier to say no to heroin than to Xanax. There is a roaring street trade for Xanax known as bricks, $5 for a 0.2 milligram tab. Overwhelmingly, most people get their scripts the old-fashioned legal way. Yes, a scourge in our community. Doctors, they talk about, and their ethical responsibility to do no harm. Large amounts of Alprazolam continue to be prescribed. Yes, they're still dishing them out, aren't they? They know they're addictive, and they know that in the long term they're no good for anxiety disorders, but they're still being dished out like candies, aren't they? Like lollies. Australia's regulatory drug watchdog, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, should impose tougher restrictions on Alprazolam and better educate GPs on the side effects of the drug. They could considering rescheduling the drug from its current Schedule 4 classification to the more restrictive Schedule 8 reserved for the most addictive drugs. There's no doubt about it, they are addictive. Benzodiazepines are addictive. That's been known back since the old Valium days, hasn't it? They're addictive. They enslave you. Once you're enslaved, you're enslaved. There's strong evidence to suggest that Alprazolam was addictive. And once dependent, withdrawal is markedly unpleasant and may be fatal. That is, you can die. Yes, from withdrawal. And it is unpleasant. It's hellish trying to get off. Even I haven't been on Xanax, but I was addicted to Serapax, and it was hellish, and it was hellish to get off, and I could never see a day when I'd be free, but somehow I am free and here to talk about it. And if you go to Wikipedia and read about the side effects of Serapax, that is Oxazepam. Read all about Oxazepam and its hundreds of side effects, from little electric shocks all over your body, or you know, dozens and dozens of unpleasant side effects, including death, of course. And it's just terrific being enslaved to these benzodiazepines and their awful side effects. Even after small doses, memory loss, uncharacteristic behavior, sedation, and coma may develop. Uncharacteristic behavior. Well, you become more careless. All you can think about is pills. All you can think about is pills and where you're going to get some more once once you're enslaved. Patients who overdosed on Alprazolam were twice as likely to require admission to intensive care as those taking other benzodiazepines like Valium. That could be due, though, statistically, that could be due to the fact that it's being dispensed more often nowadays. You know, things like that. It could be that might be correct, but it could be a matter of statistics and how they're interpreted. Even this article is only just one person's view of all these articles and experiments and research about particular drugs will all show slightly different results, and people have different opinions. Pfizer, the drug giant that manufactures Xanax worldwide, say, with the exception of the use of Xanax for the treatment of panic disorder, yes, long-term use of Xanax is not recommended. In other words, you're not meant to use it for a long time. And even with panic disorder, you're not meant to use it for a long time because you can be enslaved in a couple of weeks. Otherwise, benzodiazepines such as Xanax should be prescribed for 2 to 4 weeks only. Yes, who's going to take them on the long term? I mean, imagine taking them in the long term. Of course, Pfizer aren't going to do anything wrong, are they? They're just going to keep manufacturing them, and I guess they're going to keep getting money for them as well. They wouldn't do anything wrong or make any. I mean, they're a big company, aren't they? They're not going to do anything wrong ethically. Tolerance develops to the sedative effects of benzodiazepines. Yes, it does. You develop tolerance, and you can take enough to kill a horse. The amount I take would have been enough possibly to kill somebody, the amount that I used to take. Somebody who hadn't taken them, who wasn't enslaved. After as little as 1 week's therapy with recommended doses, withdrawal symptoms can appear following cessation of treatment. For example, rebound anxiety. You're going to go through hell getting off those. You are. In general practice, if a patient is giving you a hard time about their panic attacks or their anxiety levels, then some doctors just give them a script to shut them up and make them go away. That's one way to get rid of your patient, but it might make running a surgery easy. But what you're creating is an addicted person. Then they talk about some lady who's taking Xanax, and she's addicted to it like a heroin addict taking methadone. She was once berated in a pharmacy for taking Xanax, and he said, "Do you know this is harder to get off than heroin?" I burst into tears and walked out. This woman's weaned herself off her high dose, but she's still on a maintenance dose, so she's like somebody on methadone, isn't she? Or yes, she's enslaved. So, what do I want to say about being on Serepax? Well, it's not Xanax, no, but it was a related drug. Once you're on Serepax, your world will shrink. If you've ever seen a Dalek's view of the world as it goes down the street, once you've got Serepax-induced agoraphobia, yes, once you've got Serepax-induced agoraphobia, your world will be like trying to, if you're out on the streets trying to get around with Serepax-induced agoraphobia, it's like looking through a pinhole, trying to negotiate your way around, and that's shocking, Serepax-induced agoraphobia, shocking, it's hell, and you'll have all sorts of hellish symptoms, but I got out of it anyway. I'm free of Serepax. I've been free of Serepax for about 31 years this year, and if I got off Serepax, you can get off Xanax too, or Valium, whatever it is you're addicted to. You can. So keep that in mind. Anyway, I just thought I'd read that article about Xanax to you and just tell you what it said. And I can see that it's a very similar drug to Serepax, and all the descriptions of the symptoms are very similar. And it's just, if you're enslaved, I do feel I know what it feels like to be enslaved, and you know, you can get out of it, but you've got to decide to. You've got to decide to. You can get out of it. I'm here to tell the story. I'm here to tell the story. I am. I got out of it, and you can too.